Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance and Delaney Sexton, welcome both. Lance, you're looking good. Delaney, we're looking good. Looking good. I like it. We're going to be talking today about the first bank that has been, I shouldn't say fine, the first bank that has paid a fine over PPP fraud. So that's an important topic for the industry. And we want to get into that and some stuff that Lance and I, and Delaney, she's been doing a lot of research on this, want to talk about. Hey, there's a certificate. You know what to do with that. And let's see. Before we start, we have a little plug for America West. Joseph, where is it this year? It's in the Lowe's Coronado. Very nice. And John Miller's the headliner on that. And Jennifer does a great job on that. So make your way down to San Diego, support smart lenders. It's a great networking event, and you can't go wrong with the venue.
Guys, it's worth the price of admission to hear my old boss, John Miller. I'm sorry, John was my boss's boss when I was at SBA, and John is always a very exciting SBA person to be in the house. So go see John. It's worth the price.
I think the early bird ends Wednesday, then, Joseph, today?
I know it's been extended to the 15th.
Of
February.
Oh, okay. Well, for $4.99, you can't go wrong. Bring your team. Okay, let's go. Are you a PLP lender?
I'll be interested to see what the percentages are.
86%. Very interesting. Very good.
Nice.
Very good. And that's about representative of all lenders, isn't it, Lance, in terms of those who...
I expected the number to actually be lower, Bob,
okay.
Because, and part of the reason a lot of people got involved in SBA lending as a result of participating in PPP. There were a lot of banks that had never really done much SBA lending, and they jumped in and did some PPP loans, or they'd done a very small amount of SBA lending, and they got involved and they decided, hey, let's go ahead and jump in and do some 7A lending. So I actually expected that number to be smaller, but we've got a very seasoned group part of the.
Yeah, that's and we thank you for your support. Obviously, you wouldn't show up if it wasn't worth your time, and we wouldn't show up if it wasn't worth our time. So it's I know Lance and I and Delaney enjoy doing this, and it's fun. It's fun. It's a fun exercise, and hopefully, and if you weren't here, obviously you're here, so it's fun for you as well. All right, let's get into this, Delaney. What are we talking about today? Oh, let's hold off on that one, Joseph. Let's get into the story.
So earlier this week, the Board of Governors fined Popular Bank $2.25 million. The reason they settled with this was because allegedly the bank processed and funded 6 PPP loans for a total of $1.1 million, even though they detected fraud. Despite this, they did self-report, go through mediation, and cooperate during the investigation, but they just didn't have the proper controls in place.
Come on, you have to pronounce it. A significant what of potential fraud?
I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to say indicia.
I like that. I like that. Good. Do we know what the fraud is, Delaney?
Sadly, there has not been more information beyond just showing signs of potential fraud and not reporting this in a timely manner, but hopefully we might get some more information later on.
Now, this is from the settlement agreement. It is attached in your handout. It says the bank suffered a loss. Well, the bank didn't suffer the loss. The taxpayer suffered the loss. Delaney, they're saying there's about $8 billion worth of fraud that the Justice Department is investigating. We had that hearing in the Senate where they named 8 lenders that SBA is going to be investigating. And so the first question I want to say is we have multiple tracks of investigations, Delaney. This is from the Fed, and then we have the SBA. Give me a little background on this. Also, this is the first one, but didn't we have another lender was fined, what, $19,000 less? Tell me about that.
That is correct. It is Prosperity Bank. They paid the $20,000 to resolve allegations of improperly processing a PPP loan when they knew the borrower was both facing criminal charges and the employees knew he was ineligible. So this was a federal, what is the FCA? I'm sorry. I'm blanking on the government entity.
The FDIC.
FDS.
Lance, you're a former employee of FDIC. I guess my first question is, that seems, how do you explain the chasm? And if we're looking on a per loan basis, basically Popular Bank was fined 2-to-1, $1.1 million of fraud, and they got the penalty of 2.25. And by the way, when I say that, we should probably say they were more, I think they always settle and there's no allegations. So I don't mean to cast aspersions on Popular Bank. But Lance, talk a little bit about SBA versus Fed Department of Justice investigations.
Well, I suspect that the federal regulator in this case is fighting the bank on other aspects of bank regulation that's in their particular wheelhouse, things like BSA violations and so forth. So it's, if you look at it just from the amount of the loans done, it seems like an excessive fine. But if you look at it from the perspective of what the regulator, looks at overall, it could be appropriate.
Delaney, I'm confused. It says that the bank failed to timely report, but when you read the report, it also says the bank timely reported the fraud. So they did self-report. What more do you know about that?
That's about as far as I know. I think just because they didn't do it in a timely manner, I'm not sure why they later said that they did it in a timely manner, but, they did eventually self-report. This may or may not have helped them. I'm not sure.
From the press release, it says, though the government has taken action against PPP borrowers, this is the first time the Fed has taken action against a bank. She declined to say whether the regulator intended to file more actions against targeted banks, and the answer, obviously, Lance, is yes.
Well, there's so many.
Lance, we got SBA investigating us, and now we got the Fed. What do we do as a lender?
Well, I just think, you need to have your information and your data. Certainly, if there's evidence of fraud, it needs to be reported. But the PPP reviews or investigations are coming from a lot of different sources. It's evidenced by when we get requests from different agencies. Secret Service is involved, Homeland Security, the IRS, sheriff's offices are involved. I even had a city policeman call, and government agencies, state government agencies are involved as well. So the PPP fraud investigations are coming from every direction imaginable. So it's hard to know. They're looking real hard at this, and the Senate Select Subcommittee report certainly elevated it.
Yeah, we certainly don't want to be fear-mongering. Just I like what Lance said. Make sure you're self-reporting. Make sure you understand what's happening, and be ahead of that. And this is a question more for Lance. I mean, do you think the fine would have been larger if Banco Popular did not self-report the fraud? We don't know.
I need more. I need more details about the component of the fine.
Which we don't have.
The fine obviously is not SBA related. It's federal regulator related. So it would be nice to have a little more detail about the components of the fraud, and I'm sure there'll be more information that comes out on this story to help us understand it. When I look at it on the surface, I'm like, wow, that is a huge fine.
That's a huge number.
For that level.
Yeah.
But they could have violated. They could have violated rules with their federal regulator that resulted in a fine of this size.
I will say, I'm not 100% sure if this was under the False Claims Act, but I do know that those who knowingly submit false claims to the government are liable for double the damage. So that could be perhaps why it's such a big fine.
That's true.
Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, and we don't know if this was false claims.
No.
This is all we know. This is all that was disclosed publicly. The bank's processing and funding of these loans, despite the indication, I'm going to go indication, I don't even try to pronounce the word, indication of potential fraud and failure to timely report the potential fraud, demonstrated, and here you go, Lance, ineffective controls and procedures that resulted in violations of the bank's internal BSA protocols and constituted unsafe and unsound practices. Lance, what's BSA?
The Bank Secrecy Act, and any federally regulated bank has to follow the Bank Secrecy Act. And if you were involved in PPP lending, even if you were a non-federally regulated bank, you had to have a BSA policy that you followed in processing your PPP loans.
Yeah, well, very good. Well, we know that the for those state regulated, know that California is certainly going to be jumping on the bandwagon, and the other states as well, and as well as the credit union regulators. So all the regulators will be.
But I think an important thing to note about this is they knew there was fraud before they processed the loans. It's not unusual in PPP for you to figure out that there was fraud after the fact. And if you report that, you should be fine. But if you processed a loan, you knew, for instance, the one bank before knew the person had a felony conviction and went ahead and processed the loan. In this case, the little bit that I know about this story, they knew they were fraudulent loans, yet they went ahead and processed them.
That's a great point, Lance.
That's the important thing to take away from this. You know, PPP was such a madhouse, and we were processing so many loans. You know, SBA, I think, you know, I used to throw the number out. It's like SBA did 10 years worth of lending in 2 months.
Right.
So there were a huge number of loans processed. It's certainly not unusual for somebody that did PPP lending to have fraud within the PPP portfolio that you have. But where it becomes a issue like this is if you knew that the application was fraudulent, went ahead and processed it and funded it, then it results in this kind of fine.
Joseph, let's go to the poll question. What do you think? I'm interested in this, Lance. I don't know what they're going to say. Wow, that's a big number.
Yeah, that's pretty strong. Now, I have an opinion on this.
Please, go ahead.
It's a much bigger picture. As we all know, PPP was not PLP processing. It's not. The PPP loan program and the 7A loan program are completely different animals. The rules on 7A are pretty transparent from the SOP 5010-6. The rules on PPP changed about every time you woke up and read a new release from SBA. So, you know, the big problem here is they processed a loan, apparently from what I'm reading, that they knew was fraudulent. But it may not be an indication of the quality of their processing on 7A loans, which there are very clear rules that you have to follow. So I don't know, Bob, if I lean toward a yes or a no. I lean toward I need more information before I would answer that.
Well, but I think that is a bigger number than I thought. But I think that clearly states, the industry says, hey, you know, in interpreting that number, we did the right thing. How come other people didn't do the right thing? I don't think that's too much of a stretch.
No.
All right. Very good. Let's go through these 10. Lance, I'm going to let you take this part. And this is going to be Lance's webinar, but I want to have him touch real quick on these 10 items. When you're faced, these are the things you can do to make sure you keep your license. Go ahead, Lance. I'm going to let you run down the list. You got a couple minutes.
There's information in 2 different SOPs that talk about PLP lending. The 5010-6 or whatever the new 5010 is has a definite section about what you're supposed to do to be a compliant PLP lender. And then the compliance SOP, the SOP 5053, indicates information about reviews and potential reviews and potential implications if you have a problem in your PLP lending. So it's important to understand what's important in order to keep compliant and keep in good status with SBA if you're a PLP lender. Understanding your Paris score, understanding what that means to SBA, understanding how you can use it to your advantage to become a better PLP lender is
Lance,
important.
let me interrupt you. There's always there is someone who's going to say, "What is our Paris score?" We know there are institutions that don't access it. Real quick, how do you access it, and how do you access it? Why should you access it? Go ahead.
It's available in your lender portal. What's important about the Paris score is it's kind of a snapshot of your performance as an SBA lender, and SBA looks at it in determining the frequency of your reviews, the type of review you get. It also impacts your renewal, not just the renewal of your PLP license, but also, the length of the renewal. But the Paris score is something SBA looks at to evaluate your institution and its SBA lending performance. The other thing we're going to do in this is we're going to present and talk about when you get a review from SBA as a PLP lender, what are they going to look at? And we'll have a checklist of the information that you need to have in order for a potential review with SBA. But we're just going to try to elevate as much information as we can to help you not only remain compliant, but be ready for any of the reviews that SBA might conduct on you as a PLP lender.
Yeah, and obviously it's becoming more and more important. We're being reviewed by multiple entities, and they're becoming much more aggressive. My take on where we are today is the good news is historically, they're not, in the past, they criminalized bad loan decisions, and a lender made a bad loan decision or poor judgment, and they went ahead and filed charges against them individually. This time around, they went after the borrowers who lied, which they should. And with the banks, they're going the financial civil penalty route, which I believe they should also. So I think that's a silver lining that they're not going after individual lenders the way they are, and that was simply community bankers. They refused to go after the Wall Street banks, and they destroyed a lot of community banks and community bankers' lives when they did that. So I don't know how you feel about that, Lance. So that's a little good news.
It's different how they're doing things this time, but it's appropriate for the times. You can't really compare what we've been through with the pandemic and, are we in a recession, Bob and Delaney? I'm not sure. I think we are. There's a lot of conflicting reports, but what we're going through right now from 20 to 23 is very different than what we went through back in 08, 09, and
Absolutely. 10. Yeah. And we'll talk about this further. I especially want to take a look at the intent of the law, which said they're going to hold lenders harmless. And, let's get the money out the door. And Banco Popular did that, and now they're getting their wrist slapped. So,
big difference, Bob. Delaney can remember as a very young girl, her dad hopping on the American Airlines flight to various locations working projects for the FDIC back in 2009 and 2010. Yeah. So, I don't think we're going to see that this time.
Yeah. Delaney, do we have any more stories, or are we through for today?
We do have two more stories. I can either
give us one and we'll hold one over. Give us one and then we'll call it a day. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll give you a quick summary. Yellowstone Capital, its parent company Fundry, and about 6 other related entities reached a settlement of $27.4 million for allegations of predatory lending practices. This was by the state of New Jersey. They were charging interest rates exceeding the cap rates in New Jersey. Many of their borrowers ended up defaulting, and they've actually had prior lawsuits for misleading advertisement, contracts larger than what the borrower received, and withdrawing money from borrowers after they paid back the loan in full.
Yeah, this is a non-bank lender, and again, reinforces the concept that here's the state going after a lender. And again, if there's fraudulent activity, absolutely go after them. But it reinforces the point. You have a lot of different regulators that are going to be looking at your portfolio. Delaney, good job. Lance, as always, good to see you. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a nice
Great
weekend.
weekend.
Thank you for joining us today for today's episode. If you like today's content, hit that subscribe button to subscribe to our channel and click that bell icon to get notified about our latest videos. Thank you again for joining us today and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Catch you next time.